Welcome to a new video, and thanks for being here today. Turning 60 is a milestone that arrives with a unique mix of wisdom gained and opportunities still ahead. As someone who's now navigated this significant transition, I often reflect on what I wish someone had shared with me before I reached this age. Not the cliches about retirement planning or health screenings, though those certainly matter, but the deeper insights that could have shifted my perspective and choices earlier in life. Today, I'm sharing the knowledge I've gained through personal experience and conversations with hundreds of adults in their 60s, 70s, and beyond. These are the truths that most people discover only after crossing the threshold of their 6th decade. Insights that might have changed how we lived our 40s and 50s had we understood them sooner. What's powerful about these realizations is that they're relevant whether you're approaching 60, already past it, or even decades away. Understanding these life truths earlier can help you make more meaningful choices aligned with what truly matters in the long arc of life. Let's explore what I, and so many others, wish we had known before turning 60. 1. Your health span matters more than your lifespan. We spend decades focused on living longer, but what becomes abundantly clear after 60 is that how well you live matters far more than how long. I wish I'd understood earlier that health span, the period of life spent in good health, free from chronic diseases and disabilities, deserves far more attention than simply extending life at all costs. Had I known this sooner, I would have prioritized differently. I would have seen that investment in flexibility, strength, and cardiovascular health in my 40s and 50s would pay exponential dividends in my 60s and beyond. Not to win races or look impressive, but to maintain the fundamental mobility and energy that makes life worth living. I've watched friends who neglected their bodies struggle with basic movements by their mid-60s, while others who maintained consistent, reasonable physical activity continue hiking, traveling, dancing, and playing with grandchildren well into their 70s and 80s. The difference isn't genetics as much as decades of small daily choices. What I've learned is that modest, consistent movement throughout life, walking daily, maintaining basic strength, and preserving flexibility matters more than intense but sporadic fitness phases. The body forgives many things, but it never forgets being completely neglected for years. If you're under 60, remember, you're not exercising for how you'll look next summer, but for how you'll move at 75. Every time you choose activity over sedentary options, you're depositing into an account you'll deeply appreciate withdrawing from later. 2. Relationships compound like interest. Before 60, many of us invest too heavily in achievement and too lightly in relationships. After 60, it becomes unmistakably clear how relationships compound over time, growing either richer or poorer based on consistent deposits of attention and care. What I wish I'd understood earlier is that relationships follow a hidden mathematical formula. Small, consistent investments yield exponential returns over decades. Quick check-ins, handwritten notes, remembered birthdays, showing up during difficult times. These seemingly small actions accumulate in ways that become life-sustaining after 60. I've witnessed too many successful peers reach their 60s with impressive resumes, but impoverished social connections. They achieved everything they thought mattered, only to discover that who remains in your life at 60 matters more than what you've accumulated or accomplished. Had I known this sooner, I would have maintained more friendships from each life chapter rather than letting them fade, made time for people, even during the busiest career and child-raising years, invested in my community and neighborhood connections, prioritized my relationship with siblings, understanding that they often become essential support systems in later years. The truth is that after 60, having even a few deep, authentic relationships becomes more valuable than almost any other resource. Social isolation is emerging as a health risk comparable to smoking or obesity, while meaningful connection protects cognitive function and emotional resilience. Remember, investing in relationships isn't a distraction from success. It's a fundamental component of a well-lived life that becomes increasingly apparent after 60. 3. Regret-proofing matters more than risk management. In our 40s and 50s, many of us become masters of risk management, carefully safeguarding careers, finances, and lifestyles. What I wish I'd understood sooner is that after 60, people rarely regret reasonable risks taken, even those that didn't pan out, but almost universally regret the meaningful experiences, relationships, and opportunities declined out of fear. Looking back, I see how often I chose the safer path when my intuition urged me toward calculated risks with potential for growth and meaning. I postponed creative endeavors, delayed travel to someday, and remained too long in comfortable but unfulfilling situations because change felt risky. What becomes clear after 60 is that life's greatest regrets center around things we didn't do rather than things we did. The business not started, the relationship not pursued, the adventure not taken, the creative project never begun. These regrets linger far longer than the occasional stumbles from risks that didn't work out. If I could advise my younger self, I'd share what's now obvious. Life is far more forgiving of mistakes than we fear, and the growth from risking and recovering builds resilience that serves you well in later decades. I'd encourage taking calculated risks that align with core values, especially when regret feels likely if the opportunity passes. This isn't about recklessness, but about recognizing that after 60, you're far more likely to look back and think, I wish I'd tried, than I'm glad I stayed safe. If you're finding value in these reflections, please consider subscribing to our channel for more content that offers perspective on life's journey across different ages and transitions. Your support helps us continue sharing these conversations that matter. Now, let's continue with what else I wish I'd known before turning 60. 4. Your personality can still evolve. After 51, of the most liberating discoveries after 60 is that personality isn't as fixed as we've been led to believe. For decades, I operated under the assumption that core aspects of my personality, my introversion, my anxiety tendencies, my approach to conflict, were permanent fixtures that could only be managed, not changed. What I wish I'd known sooner is that research now shows personality continues to evolve throughout life, and in many ways, the changes accelerate after 50. Studies tracking personality development find that many people become more emotionally stable, more confident in their opinions, and more comfortable in their own skin with each decade after middle age. I've watched formerly shy friends become community organizers in their 60s. I've seen habitual people pleasers finally establish healthy boundaries. I've witnessed lifelong pessimists develop genuine gratitude practices. I myself found greater comfort with public speaking and leadership in my 60s than I ever experienced in my professionally ambitious 40s. Had I understood this earlier, I might have been more patient with aspects of myself I disliked. Knowing they could still evolve, I might have experimented more deliberately with new approaches rather than accepting limiting beliefs about that's just how I am. If you're under 60, remember that you're not locked into permanent personality patterns. The brain remains plastic, and life experiences continue shaping who you become. Your 60-year-old self might express qualities you haven't yet developed, especially if you stay open to growth rather than rigidly identifying with current traits. 5. Purpose matters more than retirement plans. We spend decades planning financially for retirement, but what becomes startlingly clear after 60 is that having purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, matters far more than having resources. I wish I'd understood sooner that purpose requires its own form of planning and cultivation. It doesn't automatically emerge once work ends. The happiest people I know in their 60s and beyond aren't necessarily the wealthiest or the healthiest. They're the ones who've maintained or discovered a sense of purpose, contribution, and meaning. Had I known this earlier, I would have explored more interests and activities outside my primary career, developed skills in areas I felt drawn to, even if they weren't professionally relevant, built relationships in communities related to my deeper interests. Thought of retirement planning as purpose planning, not just financial planning. What I've observed is that people who reach 60 with only vague notions of relaxing or traveling often find themselves adrift after the novelty wears off. Meanwhile, those who've cultivated interests, causes, creative pursuits, or ways to mentor others transition with far greater ease and satisfaction. The research confirms this observation. Having purpose is linked to longer life, better cognitive function, and greater happiness in older adulthood. Studies show that people with high levels of purpose in life had a 23% reduction in death from all causes compared to those with low purpose. If you're not yet 60, consider this permission to take your interests, passions, and values more seriously. They're not distractions from your real work. They're the foundation of your future well-being. 6. Learning new skills becomes your cognitive insurance. Before 60, many of us stop challenging ourselves to learn entirely new skills. We focus on refining what we already know, rather than venturing into true beginner territory. What I wish I'd understood sooner is that learning new skills, especially those requiring both mental and physical coordination, provides powerful protection for the aging brain. After 60, it becomes evident that friends who continued learning new things, a language, a musical instrument, digital photography, woodworking, maintain sharper cognitive function than those who relied on passive activities like reading or watching documentaries, even though both groups were mentally engaged. The research confirms this. The act of learning something unfamiliar creates new neural pathways that help compensate for age-related changes in the brain. Studies show that older adults who learned complex new skills like digital photography or quilting exhibited significant improvements in memory compared to those who engaged in social activities or less demanding mental activities. Had I known this earlier, I would have regularly put myself in the position of a true beginner at something challenging, been less concerned about mastery, and more focused on the process of learning. Sought activities that combine cognitive challenge with physical coordination. Viewed learning new skills as essential brain maintenance, not optional recreation. If you're under 60, consider this a prescription to deliberately seek learning experiences that push you beyond your comfort zone. The humility and frustration of being a beginner isn't just character building. It's literally brain building in ways that will serve you for decades to come. Conclusion: the view from 60 changes everything. Looking back from the vantage point of 60+ years, many life priorities come into sharper focus. What seemed urgently important in earlier decades often fades in significance, while aspects of life we took for granted or postponed emerge as truly essential. Had I understood earlier how different life looks after 60, I might have worried less about others' opinions and external markers of success, spent more time in nature, which now feels increasingly restorative and necessary, taken more photographs of everyday moments rather than just special occasions, been more willing to let go of relationships that consistently depleted rather than nourished me, started meditation or mindfulness practices earlier, as emotional regulation becomes increasingly valuable, focused more on collecting experiences than possessions. What becomes abundantly clear after 60 is that life is simultaneously shorter and more spacious than it appears in earlier decades. Shorter because you now have a visceral sense of time's finite nature. More spacious because you finally understand how many societal expectations and self-imposed pressures are optional. If there's one overarching message I wish I could send back to my younger self, it's this: the things that will matter most to you after 60 are the quality of your relationships, the care you've given your health, the alignment between your values and how you've lived, and your ability to appreciate the present moment. Everything else, status, appearances, accumulation, fades remarkably quickly in importance. Thank you for taking the time to consider these reflections. If you found them valuable, please subscribe to our channel for more content that bridges life stages and shares wisdom across generations. Your engagement helps us reach more people with these important conversations. Whether you're approaching 60, already past it, or decades away, I hope these insights help you align your choices today with what will truly matter in the long arc of your life.